So we're here with Birds of Prey by Ad Astra Games. If I'm correct in my turn counting, and I've done a review and I think I am, this is after moves at the end of turn 7 with my new funky aircraft counters here. There's a MiG 15 and there's the other MiG 15 in there. You can kind of see it. And then we've got our two Sabres in here and down over there. So the board position looks like something like that, with the two Sabres banked round, turning back in towards the MiGs. One of the MiGs banked away, one of the MiGs banked round, but everyone, the position still looking fairly neutral. No one's managed to come up with an advantage yet, and I'm probably going to play 2 or 3 more turns just to see whether anything happens with this Sabre now below the level of the clouds. So he's at 108 in terms of altitude, and so that's dropped into the cloud level, and we'll see whether that gives him an advantage. I don't think it's going to, because I think both the MiGs still have enough actions to be able to padlock him and therefore keep a guaranteed eye on him as he drifts through the clouds. And it's maybe one of these has the option to try and pick him off. I think a lot of the time it will depend on finding an initiative roll, maybe. I think when I look back on previous turns, I think both sides have missed fixes at fairly key points in the game, which would have given them, forced the opponent into a very, very difficult move that might have compromised them. But when you're missing fixes all the time and then having to plot simultaneously with other people, obviously, then it becomes very, very difficult to accurately try and make moves that are going to leave you in advantageous positions. So there have been a lot of, not a lot of, but some key moments in the game where a fix would have really put one side or the other in some problems, and that fix hasn't happened, and they've been able to slide out of the situation without too much difficulty. So we've ended up with quite a neutral position, or what seems to me to be quite a neutral position, with probably a couple of turns left to go before I wrap this particular scenario up. The other thing to point out, I think, at this stage, this game extends, into the modern day and near future, possibly near future, but certainly very much to absolutely current technology. What we're playing with here is 1953 fighters, and they clearly don't have any sort of missile technology on them. Now, what missile technology is essentially going to do, I think, I haven't fully read the missile launch and lock and all. There's whole sets of rules on getting locks and sensor readings and stuff, and then launch distances and the flight characteristics of the missiles, and that seems to be a whole separate deal in itself. But what that is going to give you is a whole new firing envelope, if you like, a whole new set of firing solutions. So these planes have currently have a firing solution which is like as close as you can get right in front of the nose, please, because that's what you need when you're firing machine guns and 20mm cannons at each other, close as possible and right in front of the nose. But once you start putting sort of infrared seeking and heat seeking and radar homing missiles on things, they suddenly have another firing envelope, which is, very dependent on the missile, obviously, but you need it to launch and fire and arm and track and then boom. So you've got a completely different firing solution, and so planes will then have multiple firing solutions at opposing planes, and that means that whole other areas of the board will suddenly become very unsafe, depending on what missiles things have got. So we had a situation earlier in the about 2 turns back, maybe 3 turns back, where maybe 2 turns back, where this MiG was turning, and this one over here had its tail pretty much facing away at a range of about 25 hexes. So the two were he had a very good. Firstly, he had a very good opportunity to fix it and failed, but he also would have. That may have been an ideal, infrared, seeking missile shot. It may not have been, but it could well have been a very, very viable shot that suddenly you couldn't be giving people if they had missiles. So the introduction of missiles, I think, will expand the game out quite considerably and make it much less easy to extend away from things or fly safely or assume you're safe, which you can with these more primitive aircraft. And I could go on this spiel because I think there's a general feeling it's not a general feeling, but I think it's very easy to assume that when it comes to flying aircraft or aircraft games, that the easiest aircraft to fly are going to be the slowest and most docile and least well armed. So World War I planes are going to be easier than World War II, which are going to be easier than jets. And I think actually from a certain perspective, the absolute reverse is true, that the flight characteristics of a World War I plane are so poor, its power is so poor, its speed is so poor, a lot of its characteristics and its armament and accuracy are so poor that getting anything done with it is really difficult. And as the planes get more powerful, faster, better thrust to weight ratio, more capable and more dangerous in terms of their weaponry, you're far, far more likely to be able to have shots and have action. I think a truly accurate World War I flight sim would see almost nothing happening because it would be all close to impossible to get any of the aircraft to do anything you wanted to. Anyway, that's just me rambling. Here we are going into probably the last couple of turns of Birds of Prey, and this is looking very much like we're going to stalemate out and both sides are going to break off, but we'll see. Well, I said this looked like a fairly neutral situation. I could be really wrong about that, which, wouldn't be a first. But this MiG has got Primo 2 over here. I just shot the bearings out between them, and this MiG is right. He's got that guy right on his nose, right in his gun sights, which is awesome. And the other thing is that when you look at the separation between them, it's about 20-something hexes. So the speeds, it's going to be very hard for this guy to find a move where he's not still in the gun sights after the end of the move. Let's say he comes down this way. Well, this guy can roll and track him round. Let's say he turns in hard this way and drops in here. Well, this guy can track him round. So if if Sickle 6 wins some sort of initiative roll against him, he could actually end up facing a shot here. Now, it'll be quite a long range shot and it might be quite a difficult shot, but there's possibilities here for Sickle 6 to get a good shot in on the wingman here, the American wingman, depending on how the initiatives turn out. And here is one of those critical situations where if he gets a good fix, then and forces this guy to plot and move first, he's got a really good shot, a really good chance of getting a shot. Whereas if he doesn't get a fix and he's having to anticipate, much less likely. Unfortunately for him, his odds of getting that fix are not good. because he's not on the tail. He's not tailing this aircraft. This aircraft's tail is perpendicular to him, which is, you know, not good. Better than if they were head on, but still not good. But his pilot policy of -2 really hinders him in terms of getting fixes. If these two were reversed and he had the +1 in this situation, they'd be in a very strong position. I'll come back when I've made the fix rolls and let you know how that's turned out, because this could get interesting if the fix works in the MiG's favour. Well, the initiatives didn't start off looking very promising for the MiGs. They lost. Both US planes got higher initiatives than both MiGs, and the MiGs ended up on 0 and 4, and the Americans on 5 and 8. So that made the US planes happy. But then the MiG started rolling for fixes, and this is where it went really quite wrong for the Americans, because Sickle 6 picked up a fix on Primo 2, and then Sickle 5, who had to roll next, decided to try and take Primo 1 out of the equation and force him to move first in the turn, you know, really early in the turn. And his modifiers weren't great, -5, but he rolled a 9 and put a fix in on Primo 1. And the Americans had two very, very difficult rolls to make and rolled 0s on both of them, and 0s is low in this game. You roll 0 to 9, and failed on both their fix attempts. And so what this means is that the two American planes initiatives are not fixing, and fixed, whereas the two Russian planes slide all the way over here to fixing an A, and then, you know, it doesn't really matter, but not fixed over here. So we're going to end up with a very interesting and dangerous situation now for the Americans, where Primo 1 has got to plot and move, or Primo 1 and Primo 2 have both got to plot and move, and then both MiGs get to plot and move. And yeah, this may be a situation where the US planes, I don't know, have to try and disengage. Maybe it may be the most sensible thing for them to do, to try and put as much distance as possible between them and the MiGs, and try and break off, because otherwise this could get quite dangerous for them. So yeah, this turn 8 that we're coming into looks like being a really interesting turn. I mean, we might get some action, we might not, but there's certainly a different set of decisions for both sides to make based on some very, very good initiative for the Russian planes. And this just goes to show how, you know, like I was saying before, how failing your fix attempts at key moments, you know, means the game stays in a kind of neutral status quo state, but if you make these rolls, suddenly you can tilt things very much in your favour. This was our final position then at the end of turn 8, with Sabre here, MiG here, and then this confrontation between the MiG and Sabre here. The MiG had managed to keep the Sabre right in front of its nose, so did a decent job there. But this is an incredibly difficult shot. The relative speeds of these two aircraft whizzing past each other means that the lead on that shot is really, really difficult. And when you add up all the modifiers, the MiG being a very poor pilot, a -2 pilot, so a terrible quality pilot, has no chance of hitting. If he was a +2, he would have some chance, but no chance of hitting. And the Sabre pilot was able to throw in some gun defence as well to make it even less than no chance of hitting. So he ended up on a negative column for that gunshot, for even for getting his shots on target, let alone the outcome of those shots. So no, there's a 2-stage gunshot process which I had hoped to show you, but this was not anywhere near enough a good enough shot for that to happen. So a moral victory for the MiGs, but nothing more. And if we look at this position here, I don't think there's going to be any more action. This MiG can extend off down in this direction. This Sabre can extend off down in this direction, and this guy can pull round up into this area, and these two aren't going to be able to turn around in time. They're going to end up over here next turn, and potentially around here. And so I think at this point it's fairly clear that the Sabres can disengage. They can dive and disengage. I think, I don't. Yeah, they can. So I think I'm going to call it here. This has been a really interesting look, a very detailed game, but really, really thought-provoking and fun. And you end up with something that you feel genuinely looks and feels like aerial combat, dogfighting. So that's a massive positive, and the fact that it takes some time and a little bit of calculation and process really doesn't matter to me. So I've really enjoyed this initial game, and I want to go into something, like I said in one of my earlier sort of ramblings, I want to go into something with some slightly more modern aircraft and some missiles of some description, so that there's more opportunity to engage at different ranges. So that's probably going to be the next step.